Hello everyone, my name is John Bussart. I'm an HPE Business Transformation Center engineer for Ingram Micro. I help support HPE servers, blade systems, storage, as well as networking technology solutions. In my videos, what I like to do is show you a slide from a popular PowerPoint and demonstrate to you what that means within a management context. Today we're going to continue on our discussion with HPE's Morpheus VM Essentials virtualization software, and I'm certainly going to talk about this with a VMware administrator's perspective. I've been a VMware administrator for a great many years. I got my first VCP with vSphere 3. Now, with today's video, we're going to be talking about two features. We're going to be talking about high availability, or HA, as well as the load balancing features within this environment. All right, so high availability, in the event of a host failure, we'll take all those virtual machines that were running on that host and we'll power them up on surviving hosts within the environment. Pretty typical for virtualization packages. The load balancing feature, we're going to move virtual machines around based on demand within the environment using the live migration feature. So if I am comparing this to VMware, we're looking at something like Distributed Resource Scheduler, or DRS, an alternative to something like that. Now I chose this slide because I think it shows the open source stack of the solution that's out there. Certainly the hypervisors based off KVM, QEMU, libvirt, Open vSwitch, and probably what's most important for our environment or our discussion today, and that'll be pacemaker clustering services. That's what makes HA capabilities happen within this environment. Now you could certainly download these open source solutions if you wanted to, but it'd certainly take a tremendous amount of time to be able to understand and learn them and build them as a part of a best practice within an infrastructure. With the new HPE integrated ISO installer, it will set up this entire stack for you without any problems. Right? So you don't need to be an expert in these technologies to get them all working. Right, and then on top of that, we will manage it with HPE's Morpheus VM Essentials Manager. And we're going to look at that in a little bit. All right, so with all that being said, let's explore how to take advantage of these features. Here I am at the Morpheus VM Essentials Manager, so let me log in. So if I was making an analogy here again to VMware, this would be a lot like my vCenter server. So this is my central management plane into my virtualized environment. This might be in some ways a little bit better because I can manage both VM Essentials as well as a VMware environment from this interface if I wanted to. So let's talk about how clustering is enabled within this environment. So let's look at that. Certainly, as you go to deploy this, you will create a cluster, but there's some features you need to enable in order to get things like HA to work. So let's show you that. If I go over to infrastructure, down to clusters, here's my cluster here. I'm going to select that. All right, so at the cluster level, I'm going to click edit. I'm going to make sure automatically powered VMs is on. And then I need a data store heartbeat, so we certainly will need shared storage for this. All right, so I'm going to go over to storage here. And over here I have a volume that I've created via iSCSI. All right, and if I edit this, you'll see I have a heartbeat target. You can see we get a little verbiage about high availability down below. All right, so you will need to enable that within your cluster to get these features to work. Another piece I think it's important, if I go over to summary, I scroll down below, you can see I have pacemaker listed here, and I can spread this out and get some information on the status. Now this is new within this version. I'm glad they've put it in there because in the past I needed to go to the CLI to check the status. I will say it's a little bit slower today, but as I found with a lot of the pieces that they're adding to this feature, they add them in and they make them better over time. All right, but if I don't see what I like here, I could certainly go to a CLI, and here's a CLI into one of the hosts that I have, and I could just run this command. Let me put in my password, and we could see my cluster summary, and everything is online and working properly. All right, so I would say, as a matter of working with this product, if you don't see something you like within the interface, wait a little while and it will change. Or you can go to a CLI and use the open source commands to be able to take a look inside your environment. Now I wouldn't make configuration changes from the CLI, but sometimes it's nice to move to the CLI to get some commands. Just like in an ESX environment or VMware environment, you know certain ESX CLI commands that you use to troubleshoot your environment. So that's something I would say that you could look at. Now before I do anything in this environment, let's look at the hosts. You can see that I have 3 hosts running here. What I will tell you is that these hosts are nested virtual machines. Normally, I wouldn't do this in production certainly, but normally these are ran on physical hosts. But sometimes when you're kicking the tires on a new solution, you may want to do it in a virtualized format. So these 3 hosts actually, if I look inside a VMware environment, they are these 3 hosts that are over here. And I thought this was a good way to be able to simulate a failure that happened in the environment. Now, I don't want to make this a tutorial on how to nest virtual machines, how to put VM Essentials on a VMware environment, but I'm going to give you some hints or some things to look into if you want to do this in your environment. And I think it's a good idea. Again, if you're kicking the tires on something, you could set up a cluster, make mistakes, make configuration issues, and maybe revert a snapshot and try all over again. So I think that's pretty good. So let's take a look at the 3rd host in this cluster. So I'm going to go over and I'm going to edit settings. Now, certainly if you've done nested virtual machines before, you know that you will need to expose hardware assist as well as enable IO MMU. And you might want to only utilize one socket to most effectively use your licenses. Certainly, when you download this product, it does run for a certain time. You know, aware of it, just so you could, again, kick the tires on the solution. So I'd recommend that you download it. Now, the other piece I want to show is how I have the networking set up. All right. And I want to have a bigger conversation on the networking for VM Essentials. So HPE recommends with a physical system that you should have 6 network adapters, but you can go down to 4. So let me describe that and talk to you how that can happen. So with 6 network adapters, during the install, you're going to take 2 of those adapters and put them in a bond for your management traffic. So kind of like VM kernel. You're going to take another 2 network adapters, right, put them in a bond for your production VLANs, and you could have multiples of these if you wanted to, right? But at a minimum, you'll want 1. This will put where you'll put all your virtual machines on. Then you'll want 2 network adapters, whether it's fiber channel or we're talking about iSCSI. You want those adapters for your shared storage technology. In the case of iSCSI, you'll want to do something like MPIO. And that's what these 2 adapters are down here. Now, the way you get the 4 adapters is you can take the management traffic and ride it across the production VLAN bond. Production network as a VLAN, so that can reduce you down to 4 network adapters. So with this solution, what I have is 4 network adapters, but it's not configured like that. Basically, I have this network adapter in a bond of 1 network adapter for my management traffic, and I have this adapter, a single adapter in a bond for its my production VLANs. And I know that's odd, but certainly Linux allows you to be able to do that in the environment. So a bond of 1, so it's not much of a bond, but you can do it. I did it this way, so that way you could follow along with all the tutorials and the documentation and things like that. So that's how I have this set up within the environment. Now, if you added 2 network adapters to the same VLAN, you're going to create a loop, and that's why I've done it in this fashion. So let me cancel that. So again, there's my cluster. Let's go back into my VM Essentials software. Right, now let's go look at virtual machines. If I look at the virtual machines, you'll see that I have this high availability VM on this host. So it's my first cluster, 3rd host. Right? And none of these other virtual machines exist on that host. Right? And if I select this virtual machine here, I've gave it a pretty decent amount of resources, and I've done that so maybe this will move around. We can see the load balancing feature happen after we recover from the failure in the environment, but we could certainly see those resources. I can actually even get over to a console and actually show you this is a running virtual machine. All right, and maybe I'll create a new document. Right, we'll place that there, so when we do the failure, we will see that machine will power up on another host. Right, we can see it's the same machine. All right, again, we can get to that same VM through our incidences, and here is that incidence. And again, I can go into that, and we can see that virtual machine down here. All right, so let's go through and simulate the failure inside this environment. So again, I can get to a console. I can interact with this virtual machine. So let's go over here. Let's right click and we're going to take a power and power off. Alright, so we pretty much, if this was a physical host, we would have pulled the plug on this machine. And we can go back over here. Alright, and maybe we'll go over this time over infrastructure. I'll go down to compute. You can see my VMware hosts as well as my VM Essentials hosts. Again, we can manage both of those through this management interface. But again, I'll go into the third host. I'll go over to the console. Right. Well, actually, this is the host of the console, but if I hit that, you can see that's kind of failing out. Now, if I go to the VM and I select the VM and I go over to console as well, you can see that this guy's not waking up. So certainly there is a failure that's happened. Now, what I'm going to tell you is, you can look at the time. So I'm going to fast forward through some of these spots. So certainly look at the time to see where we set it. But remember, this is a nested virtual machine and environment. So this wouldn't, what's happening here is going to take a little bit longer than if it was a physical environment. So let's go back over to infrastructure. Let's go to clusters. We'll select my cluster. And I'm going to look at my hosts. Now everything looks fine now, but what will happen is a series of things. So first, this green button will turn into a question mark, and then this will probably stay green, and a little time after that you'll see it turn yellow, and even longer after that it'll turn red. So we're waiting to see a failure happen, and then when that happens we'll go see if our VM is powered up on another host in the environment. Alright, so we can see that things have changed. You can see I've got a question mark and I have a yellow exclamation mark over here. Again, that'll turn to a red X over time. But again, speaking to what we see inside the environment, if I go to summary again and look under pacemaker, this hasn't necessarily caught up with the failure yet. Like I said, it will over time, so don't let this concern you. And if you really want to see what's going on, right, you could go inside the CLI. So let's do a clear, and then we'll run that pacemaker cluster services status. And then we'll see one of them's offline. Right. But again, it will show the environment. I'm trying to get something to happen a little quicker so I can demonstrate something to you in a short period of time. I could have certainly waited longer and showed you these errors, but I just wanted to make you aware of that. Right. So let's go take a look at the virtual machine and see if it's powered up anywhere just yet. So I'll go over provisioning and incidences. We'll scroll down. Here is the virtual machine. Scroll down a little bit further, you can see now it's on host 2. So first cluster, host 2. And if I go into the console, right, we'll see that we've rebooted. And now I'm going to log in. And we can see it's the same virtual machine because there's the file I've created. Now I want to get the load balancing feature to activate here. I don't have a lot running on this host, but I'm hoping something will kind of migrate around so we can see that. So I'm going to run this heavy load utility, which just generates a load on the system. And I'm going to power this guy on. It should crank up to 100% CPU utilization as well as start using some memory in our environment. Alright, so that's the failure. So let's go over and take a look and power on our system again. Alright, so now we can see the status over here is an exclamation. Again, we'll select the cluster and we'll go to hosts, and we can see that failure is happening. And like I said, that'll turn to an X, red X after a while. So let's recover our system. Again, I should be doing this with physical hosts, so I go power on my system, maybe with ILO or something of that nature. So let's see if this will recover. While we're waiting for this to happen, let's go look at summary real quick. Let's go over to pacemaker. And we can see our host is still online over here. Right, so again, we may have missed the error come up, and we may have missed the notice that it'll say it's fenced, but sometimes you can come in here and you can see that it will be fenced. But again, we're still waiting for this to kind of come back and resolve. So let's go take a look at that again. Let's go look at summary. Pacemaker. There we go. Now we can see it's fenced. All right, so it's set aside. All right. Again, we're waiting for this to recover. So again, it does show you an error has happened over time. And again, we're waiting for this host to come back online. Alright, so we could see that our power has a green status. We still have a yellow over here on the overall status. We should be starting to recover this time. Let's take a look at summary here. Let's go down to the pacemaker, see what it's saying. It's still saying it's fenced. Let's refresh it and see if anything happens. Nope, it's saying it's okay at this point, and we could also probably see that through the CLI as well. So we'll do another clear. And then we'll do PCS status. We can see all the hosts are online at this point. All right, now if I go look at VMs, you'll see that none have migrated at this point. But if we wait a little bit, we should see a migration happen. We should see a virtual machine move on over to that host. So if I go back over to infrastructure, back to clusters, back into our cluster, and hosts, you'll see we even got a green status. So we're just waiting for a migration to start happening. We'll normally see that over here. We might see like a red tick show up over here, but we'll wait a little bit and see what happens. All right, so I've got a red tick over here, and if I click on it, we'll see that that highly available virtual machine is now migrating back on over to another host in the environment. So this will take a little bit because it's not my big virtual machine. So we'll sit here and wait for that to happen. And while we're waiting for that to happen, we could certainly go into that virtual machine here. Let's go down, select it. So it's doing that migration again with the live migration feature. So we could certainly get into this virtual machine and interact with the system. So again, you can see the CPU utilization. All right. So I'm going to turn this off so maybe it happens a little quicker. Go back over to cluster, go back to our hosts. Okay. And we can still see that migration is happening. Alright, so if we go up and look, we can see our highly available virtual machine is migrating over, but it looks like this live migration VM is moving as well. So these are just names of different virtual machines. So things are certainly moving around on my behalf, dependent on load. So now if I go over into the hosts, we'll have VM Essentials 3 here. And we'll look at the virtual machines that are over there, and we can see that highly available virtual machine is back where it started in the beginning. All right, looks like this is completed as well. The live migration virtual machine also finished moving. All right, so this is a little bit bigger virtual machine. So I know it took a little bit of time to migrate on over, but just keep in mind it's a nested virtual machine. If I go look at the clusters overall virtual machines, so if we go back to infrastructure and down to clusters, right, and then we'll look at virtual machines, you can see this live migration virtual machine is moved as well. All right, so we went over a few things today. We talked a little bit about nesting virtual machines. We talked about the CLI. We talked about the hypervisor stack, as well as I showed you the high availability feature, as well as the load balancing feature. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and please stay tuned for more videos.